Our next session has two very animated speakers. Dana Coelho, Colorado State University, Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager, and her trusty sidekick, Dana Karcher, Davey Resource Group, Area Manager and Project Developer. But you have not enjoyed yourself as much in an automobile if you have the two of them in the car. I met them at the airport, and they sent me a text message and said, "We just landed." So I went, okay. So then Dana C tells me she's got Dana K with her. I said, that's okay too. Do you have room in the car? I said, yeah, I got plenty of room in the car. And then they sent me a photograph, a selfie, so I would recognize them when they came in. Okay? You are in for a real treat. Would you please welcome Dana Coelho and Dana Karcher.
Now the real test. I figured out how to turn my mic on, which is cool. We have a fancy remote, which is cool. I don't know. That's like the next thing is, can I figure out how to hold all of these things and walk up onto a stage, not fall down, not lose anything. So far, so good. All right. So as our friend Tom said, I am Dana Coelho, Urban and Community Forestry Program Manager for the state of Colorado. My peer for the state of New Mexico is out here somewhere, Alyssa O'Brien. We love her. They've got a booth out there, and part of why I think I'm engaged in giving talks like this, why I enjoy giving talks like this, connecting with communities in Colorado and New Mexico and Wyoming and California, wherever folks will invite us to talk about our stuff, it's our job as state coordinators to help all of you do the work that you do. Do your work better. Care for trees, care for yourselves, care for your employees. And we are on the precipice of some historic investments in urban and community forestry. We're going to need to spend a lot of money over the next 5 to 10 years. We want to do that in the best possible way, in the places that need it most, using the data and the tools that will support our making the best decisions possible. So that's kind of why we're here, why we're talking about this stuff, why Dana Karcher and I have been working together for so long. We're going to talk a fair bit about EAB, the emerald ash borer, and some work that we've been doing in Colorado on a so cleverly named project. Your ash is on the line. Inspired by Denver's Be a Smart Ash campaign. There are so many ways to riff on that theme. But we don't want to stop at talking about managing the urban forest for one single pest, thinking about one single species or one genus of trees. We want to challenge ourselves and all of you, all of our colleagues, to think about how can we use the data we've collected? How can we use the tools that we've created, the management plans we've built, the networks we've built, the relationships we've cultivated to manage more diverse, more resilient, longer lasting, benefit providing urban and community forests for the long term. So that's what we're doing. That's why we're here. 3 things that we would love for all of you to be thinking about while we're talking, mostly at you, but hopefully a little bit with you. I'm totally fine being interrupted at any point. We have some fun questions and little duckies to throw around, which is kind of fun, which I think also turn into raffle tickets. Is that true? True. So engage in question and answer, get duckies, get raffle tickets, win stuff, check the board so you can get your stuff. Anyway, things we want you to think about. Management requires data. period, right? Whether you're managing for a pest, you're managing a population of trees, you're managing a project, you're managing a team, you need to know what you're working with in order to manage that system. 2, there are no one-size-fits-all solutions, period, right? Not to managing EAB, not to managing urban forests. What works in Albuquerque may not work in Alamogordo. What works in Denver might not work in Longmont, et cetera, et cetera. But there's always something that we can learn from each other. There's something that we can adapt. There's something that we can build off of. We're not starting from scratch, but we're not trying to apply what Colorado has done to New Mexico. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about creating relevant data sets, tools, processes, and systems within which we can continue to learn and to grow. So, EAB, Emerald Ash Borer, in a nutshell. It's been here in the US for just over 20 years. It is considered the most destructive tree insect pest ever to have been introduced into North America. The urban and community forestry program, as we know it in state government, in the federal government, and the practice of a lot of communities, grew out of response to Dutch elm disease and loss of lots of elms and a significant amount of canopy in lots of communities. We thought planting green ash was a real great idea after that. Now we're learning the same lessons all over again. This is where Emerald Ash Borer was first introduced into the States, how it's progressed year after year, and I don't think they're updating this graphic anymore because I couldn't find it and update it to have like a bigger cool circle with the actual dot that's on Portland because it's in Oregon now, which is a bummer. But why that's relevant, right? You know, natural spread of something is this stuff, right? An insect traveling within the range of its host species by its own volition, its own cravings, its own power. The way that it got from here over there was on someone's car. That insect did not fly from, Ohio to Boulder. Somebody went camping, right? Somebody visited a national park, somebody visited a national forest, somebody went away to school, whatever they did, they brought that bug over there and it jumped over the plains. And then it jumped again last year over to Oregon. One of the most important things we can do as professionals, as communicators with a platform upon which sometimes people listen to us, don't move firewood, right? Whether it's this pest, it's another one, always going to be an important message. Why is that an important message? Why are we talking about this pest from the Midwest in New Mexico? Because there is a lot of ash naturally occurring, naturalized, and planted in communities across the country. Red is showing where there are already confirmed infestations. Again, slightly not updated map because it's over there as well. But we have ash forests in the Southwest, and this is just the naturally occurring range of Fraxinus species of ash trees. It doesn't include explicitly all the communities within these places where ash is being planted because it's a tough tree. It's hard to be a tree in a community in New Mexico. It's hard to be a tree in a community in Colorado or Wyoming where it's crazy hot and dry one day, crazy hot and cold the next day, everything in between. It is a tough environment to be a tree, and ash are pretty tough trees. We need to take it seriously. We need to be planning for this insect to come, for other insects that will threaten damage and destroy one of the most valuable resources that we have in our communities. This is just a picture of what the spread of EAB has looked like in Colorado. We also had a new detection last year. It is still confined to what we call the northern Front Range of Colorado. It's not yet confirmed in Denver, the largest city in the state. It hasn't gone south from there. Maybe it's there and we just haven't seen it. There's lots of other things that like to munch on ash, so some of them look pretty crappy and we need to be managing them and phasing some of them out anyway. But this is the scope of what we're dealing with in Colorado right now. The approach that we're taking as the State Forest Service, the agency responsible for providing technical and financial assistance to communities, to nonprofit organizations, to education institutions throughout the state, we want to give people, again, data and tools so that they can manage the tree resource that they have. One of the most important, tools in our toolbox is a statewide inventory platform that we've built over the past several years with a company called Planet Geo on their tree plotter platform. This is called Co-TreeView. It's freely available to communities that we work with. We have field foresters that can go out into communities and help complete management inventory, looking at rights of ways, park trees, that kind of stuff. Whether we do that inventory or a community does it, we bring the data into this tool so that we have a bigger picture of what is going on in Colorado or what is going on in, say, the northern Front Range, where we have a concern like an invasive species that is not going to limit itself, its population, its behavior to one community or one community at a time. I need to know, our field foresters need to know what that ash resource is at a much larger scale. This is a tool that we can use to do that. Not going to go into detail on, actually, I'm going to go back really quick. Can anybody read the words that were on that slide? They were pretty tiny. I'm going to say no, because this is where the duckies go, right? And this is where we're not just talking about ash, and we're not just talking about EAB. Ash species are the most overrepresented tree species in our tree inventory as we know it. This isn't like a complete every single tree in every community in the state of Colorado, but like it's the best we've got. We have about 15% ash, fraxinus species. What do you think is the next most common, or what other species or what other genera are in the top 5? Good guess. No. Ooh, honey locust. I heard populus. Pew. Yes, pinus. Who else? Acer. Was that you? You. Cool. Yay! There, I don't have duckies for everybody, but we'll do more, right? There's other genera that we need to be thinking about, and we will talk more about why we need to be thinking about those later. Y'all are so on it. Okay. So that's what's going on with EAB, kind of big countrywide. Oh no, there's this big scary thing and we have too many ash trees across the country. Oh no, there's this big scary thing and we have too many ash trees across Colorado. We have some communities that for the last 10 years have really stepped up their game and taken advantage of the opportunity and the challenge presented by this invasive insect being present to talk to people about how important it is to plant, manage, maintain, and remove and replace trees. Denver, biggest city, biggest budget, right? They kind of out of the gate started doing some great stuff. Their city forester at the time when EAB was first found in Boulder said, well, I know it's not here in Denver right now, but we're pretty certain it's coming. We need to increase our budget significantly if we're gonna manage this. How are we gonna do that? I'm gonna take city council members with me to Michigan and Wisconsin and show them what it's gonna look like 10, 15 years from now. When they came home from that trip, cut them a check for $2 million. Several years later, the forestry department got cut another check to increase their budget again because the threat is still there, the need is still there, and they were able to demonstrate doing good stuff and making improvements with those investments in the city forestry department. Very similar story in Boulder, the community where the insect was first found. What's really cool about Boulder's story, I think because it really was the first place in the Intermountain West for this insect to show up, Boulder is a very progressive, educated, some would say hippie or trustafarian kind of community. They've got a lot of resources there. They studied the crap out of this. And they studied the trees, they studied the insect, they studied, detection methods, treatment methods, biological control. They studied the art and science of bringing people together and working collaboratively on this problem, and they published about it, and they shared it with other Front Range communities and other folks, and we know so much more about how the emerald ash borer behaves in our ecosystems in the semi-arid Intermountain West than we did before it showed up here, because it's not the same. It's not the same behavior, it's not the same spread, it's not always the same signs showing up in trees. So we know so much more because of the work and the collaboration and the research and the sharing that folks did in Boulder. Another large well-funded and progressive Front Range community, Fort Collins. That's where our agency is located. It's where the flagship campus of Colorado State University is. So again, this long history of investing in research, investing in monitoring, investing in planting and maintaining a diverse urban forest. We've been able to learn a lot with and from Fort Collins. But what about the little guys? What about the hundreds of other communities in Colorado? Smaller communities. They don't have city foresters. They don't have huge budgets. What is our role as a state agency in helping them learn from Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, others, and have access to the data and the tools that they need to manage their community forest resource, which is, again, one of their most valuable resources. That is where I will pass things on to my collaborator, co-conspirator, and namesake, Dana. Thanks, Dana. You're welcome, Dana.
Okay, so Dana and I did this presentation. Can you hear me? Great, thanks. Oh, God, she stole my notes. So isn't it funny? She's a wanderer and I'm not. But Dana and I did this presentation for Western Chapter last spring. Similar presentation, not this exact one. And we learned something. Our name is Dana, right? D-A-N-A. And how do you pronounce D-A-T-A? Data, right? I say data. She said I'm wrong because then my name would be Dana. So there you go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple projects that were done in Colorado that really focused on the fact that there are communities that have everything they could possibly want, aka Denver, and communities that have absolutely nothing. And when it comes to managing pests, or even really their trees. So the Your Ash is on the Line project, it aims to provide communities with knowledge and data or tools that are necessary to plan for and respond to this EAB infestation, which is happening whether or not we know it. I live in Pueblo, Colorado. It's new for me. Last time I was here, I think I lived in Belton, Texas. So it's been really interesting because we detected, when we did the inventories, we saw signs of EAB just north of us, in the town just north of us. And when I talked to our parks director after I got to town and met with him, he said, oh, we don't have it here. And it's like, no, you do have it here, right? You really do. If you've got ash trees, it's coming. So part of this project was to develop tree inventory data. And there were 36 communities that were chosen through this project. And this project was a federally funded project through Landscape Scale Restoration, right? LSR, an LSR project. And we estimated that there were 2,300 street miles for this project and that there were a little over 3,000 ash trees based on what we knew about ash trees at the time in Colorado. Well, we learned a lot that that wasn't all necessarily true. So we had to go out and do these inventories, and really the challenge was more than anything else that I would pick up the phone. I spent a year calling 36 communities. Every time I get a little time, I'd say, hi, my name is Dana Karcher and I work for the Davey Resource Group. Who? You don't know me from a hole in the wall. And they also, my phone number is a California phone number, and they're like, somebody from California who lives in Texas is calling me about ash trees. We don't know anything about this. So I really got nowhere. I talked to mayors. I talked to the guys that mowed the lawn. I talked to the city clerks. I talked to everybody in these communities. And everybody said, you want to do what? You want inventory? Okay, whatever. They didn't really care, and they really didn't want us to do it. So in 2020, we got to get these inventories done. And actually, Dana came on board in about that time, and Dana said, well, we'll try. So, hi, we're from the government, the Colorado State Forest Service, and we're here to help. Well, that didn't go over really very well either. So finally, we just said, well, I can kind of vaguely remember the phone call we were all on together. We just got to get these inventories done, because if you don't have any data, it's really difficult to make decisions. For those of you who are business owners, you don't make your decisions, you shouldn't be making your decisions, not knowing what's happening in your company, correct? So you've got to have the data. So finally, we just did it. And we sent my colleague and good friend Sam out to do the tree inventories. And off he went, and using a database, he went through every community. And the idea behind this was to create this opportunity for knowledge for these communities, to help them understand that there are solutions to EAB, that when two communities are right next to each other, that EAB is probably in that community next door, they're together, so you might want to collaborate with your neighbor next door. And then this other part about urban wood utilization, which we would love to do a whole talk on that next time, right? Okay. So we wanted to make sure that these cities understood that we were there to really provide them information. And this is the information that we found. We were really wrong about the number of trees, but we were really right about the benefits. And we ran the benefits through, everybody here familiar with iTree? Raise your hands. Good. If you don't have your hand raised, you need to go itreetools.org when you get home and understand that it is a tool that is available for you to understand the value of trees. Not just you, but your clients and your friends, and it's a great party trick when you can show them the value of their trees. So, look at these benefits, right? $1.5 million, all of these really fabulous benefits, and that's really good stuff. But in reality, these are all the benefits that are going to be removed from the communities. These are going to be taken away because this is ash trees. So that's important. And when Dana talked about the city council going to Detroit or wherever they ended up going, I think it was that neck of the woods where EAB began, and saw these neighborhoods. And Paul Reese showed a really great picture out of Cleveland. When they saw that that was going to happen, they began to understand that these are the benefits that are going to go away. So this just happens to be the community of Wellington. And their yearly benefits are only $59,000, but look at look at the number of ash trees they have, and look at, if you look up in that quadrant that's up in the left side of the city, that's like a whole bunch of trees that are going to come out at the same time. And not only are you losing the benefits, but you're losing the shade, and you're losing any aesthetic benefits that are coming along with that. How can they replace this? What can they do? So we went down to the site level with each of these, and this is Wellington again, and showed them exactly where the trees were. So they know exactly where their ash trees are now. And that's important, because if you know exactly where they are and how big they are and what condition they're in, which we know, their location, we can begin to make decisions about how we're going to take care of our ash trees in communities. So part of the project was to build these little one-page project overviews. So these are the handout that can be printed very easily. It says that in this city that there are 40 public ash trees, and this is what they're doing. I don't think I mentioned it at the beginning, but part of this is really political. And here's a true confession. Many of you know this. I didn't go to forestry school. I have a degree in political science. And so, for me, I get this, right? You got to be able to show data. You got to be able to show it to the people who pay the bills, right? So they like the graphs, they like the charts, and we were able to put this together for every single community and say, here you go, here's a tool that you can use to say, please take care of these trees that we are losing the benefits of in our community. And when I showed you Wellington, one of the things that I noticed about it, there was the Wellington High School right there in the middle, and they're losing all the shade trees where people walk to school. So who's going to be concerned about that? So we have this little tool here, which was kind of neat, kind of fun to put together, really political. And you can see the partners down at the bottom, because we had fun with another person who helped us with this, a guy out of, wait, some of you may know him, Lance Davison. He used to be the state coordinator for New Mexico. So he was on this project with us too, so it was really fun to work with Lance. But this was the really cool, don't scan this, it's broken, I'm getting it fixed today. But anyway, you can scan this little tool or go down to gis.davey.com, Colorado EAB, and you can answer questions and say, we're going to treat our trees, or we're not going to treat our trees, or we're going to do these different things for our trees. We're going to treat some of our trees. We're going to treat our small trees. We're going to treat our big trees. You can make these there's decision trees in there for you, and it comes out and it spits out about a 4-page EAB plan for the community. It's a great tool. It was easy it wasn't easy to put together. That's a lie. It was actually difficult to put together because there was a lot of people who wanted a lot of different things. But the bottom line is data creates action. So what's next? We went to the city of Aurora. Aurora is a big city, and we pivoted to Aurora right before the pandemic started, and we kicked off this fabulous project because their city council said to their parks department, excuse me, how many ash trees do we have in our community? And no one could really answer that question because they wanted to know both private and public ash trees. They wanted to know about the trees that they were going to take care of, but they also wanted to know about the trees that they weren't going to take care of. Now, here's the $110,000 question. Why would they want to care? Why would they care about the private ash trees? There's a good, they're still in the environment, right? That's another way. What else? Solid waste. Who said it? I wish I had a duck. I'd throw it at you. How much, okay, you don't take your waste to your backyard when you take down a tree, right? It goes to the landfill. Who runs the landfill? The city. So the city's like, okay, not only are we going to be dealing with our own trees, but we're going to be dealing with all these other trees. So they said, well, we need to find out how many ash trees we have in the city. There's a number of ways you can do that. You can look at LIDAR. LIDAR can show you species once you ground truth that. We could drive around and look in people's backyards, like peeping Toms, and miss probably half the trees because they're behind the house that we can't see. So there's an accuracy problem there. And we could use iTree. Once again, iTree can tell a story. So iTree Eco was the tool that was used in this case. Went out, started the project, got going. Does anybody know what happened in Aurora during the pandemic? was a police shooting and riots. Everything shut down, no matter whether you mowed the lawns, pruned the trees, or answered the phones. Everybody in Aurora was focused on that problem, and the project came to a halt. But guess what? The bug does not. But thank goodness the ash trees were all still there, and we kept moving through this project through some of the challenges that we faced. We talked a lot about this, the consequence of inaction. If you have an employee that's really screwing up, so those of you who are bosses, if you have an employee who's really screwing up, how long do you want to keep that person after you've tried to really rehabilitate them, right? You got to act. How many of you have a really great employee who you want to promote, but they're going to tell you they're going to leave? If you don't promote him, make a decisive action, they might leave you, right? Same sort of thing. You can treat trees, you can remove trees, and you need to replace the trees. If you just leave it alone, the risk, and Paul talked a lot about risk this morning, the risk is really immense. But because City Council is who they are, and we love them because they're important, they want to know what it's going to cost, right? So Aurora actually had a street tree inventory, and they had an ash tree inventory of all their public trees. And then we used Dana's favorite tool, math, to figure out how much this was all going to cost. So we used the street tree inventory to look at how it would cost just for their own trees. But then we did this iTree Eco. And if you're familiar with iTree Eco, it's a process where you actually go out and it's like forest inventory analysis. You go on private property and public property, and they're non-permanent plots. And you take information, you know, the tree, species, size, health, et cetera, et cetera. You look at the structure, and you run it through a software, and you come out with the structure, function, and value. So you can see from this that there was, we determined that there were over 110,000 ash trees, which was 6.4% of the population in both public and private trees. But we also learned a lot of other stuff about Aurora's trees when we were doing this. One of the things was that there are 44 unique tree species were identified during this plot collection. Number one tree, somebody already said it before, honey locust. Number two tree, Austrian pine. Here's the really good news for Aurora. 70% of the trees were less than 8 inches in diameter. Why is that important? Young population, easier to treat, right? Cheaper to treat too, because you treat by DBH. You know, there was some information about canopy cover and that kind of stuff, but I'm going to read you this statistic because Dana's going to come back to this in a little bit. Of the highest concerned pests and pathogens, Asian longhorn beetle. Has anybody seen ALB out here yet? No. Asian longhorn beetle and spongy moth, they threaten 38% of Aurora's forest. So if it isn't EAB, what is it? If it isn't EAB, what's next? So this really, I think for Aurora, gave them enough data to consider how they're moving into the future. And there was other data, you know, stormwater, air pollutants, carbon sequestered, and all the good stuff that trees do for us, which was really great. That gave data, that political data, to City Council to help them justify why they want to save trees, why they want to manage their urban forest, why they want to move forward with a program. And then we did the math part. And so how many of you have kids who hate math? You have to have math in life, you do. We took what to measure, the health, the size, and we used size class, and the location. Because if a tree's in a really crappy location and it's an ash tree and there's no reason, you know, it's like not in the right place, might pose a danger, might be planted in the wrong place, might want to remove that, times the cost of treatment or removal and replacement, it kind of comes up with your solution. Let me explain that in a little more detail. So urban slam, slow ash mortality was an integrated approach that was developed really in the Northeast, where you treat random trees, a cumulative of 40% of the trees actually, over a 12-year time period until the quote-unquote invasion has passed. Now, we're not quite sure if the invasion will ever pass, so we're not quite sure if the science on this is right. Or you can proactively replace all of the trees, and that's that orange line on the graph. All ash trees will be removed and replaced with a new tree that cannot become infested with EAB. But we didn't even talk about the other things that it could become infested with, the future things. That's a high-cost thing right away. And then, or reactively remove all of the ash trees if they're infested, but not replace them. So these were some of the solutions that were proposed. And then we kind of looked at the cost of these, and SLAM was the cheapest, removing all was the next cheapest, and proactively replace all was the most expensive. So it kind of gives a dilemma to a municipality. What are they going to do? How much money are they really going to have to come up with because of this one species of trees is causing all of these problems? So the solution that we came up with Aurora was, hey, let's just do a combination of all three. Because they have an inventory, because they have the data, they decided to treat the most valuable trees, the ones that were healthy, that looked good, because they physically went and looked at the trees. They managed their inventory on a day-to-day basis. And they looked at small and hazardous trees, said small trees can be replaced with small trees, so we'll take some of those out. We added in the cost of outreach and education because any of you who have been in an urban forestry setting, when you remove trees, there's an uproar no matter what it is, right? No matter what it is. There's equipment. You have to buy more stuff to get those trees out of the ground or hire more people to get the trees out of the ground. There's wood waste that you have to deal with, whether it's chipped, double, because it's an ash tree, or whether you're going to make lumber out of it. You have to have a kiln, you have to have the saw, you have to have all that stuff. And then there's additional staff always, too. And at the same time, you have to keep looking to see if you've even got the bug in your community. So then there was more math to add to this. We've added up the cost of treatment for 2,088 trees, which was 36% of the ash trees. We looked at what it would cost for removal. We looked at planting and replacement in a variety of ways. I love coming to this conference because there's so many volunteers here, and I wish we could pick up the volunteers from New Mexico and come and help replace ash trees in Colorado. We've got some really good things going on here. So, whether you use in-house, contractor, or volunteer, there's, it still costs money to replace the trees. And then, of course, the wood utilization, they would have had to have started a whole new wood marshaling yard for this. And then they would have had somebody to pay somebody to actually do outreach, to tell people it's going to be okay. We're going to plant more trees. We'll have to pay somebody $45,000 a year to do that. But that doesn't even really talk about the private trees, right? So one of the things we saw that on the list, they still had ash trees as a tree to plant on their list. So if you still have ash trees on your tree list in this state, you might want to consider removing that. There is no enforcement for the ownership of private ash trees that were in front of houses that were actually infected with EAB. Nobody could go up to them and say, I'm sorry, but ma'am, but that tree has to come down. Nobody could say that. There was absolutely no way to do that. There was no ordinance on the books for that. And there was no community-wide effort. The plan should be, so Be a Smart Ash was for the whole community of Denver. It was for the entire community, not just for the city itself. So the effort has to be for all trees, public or private. And it's going to cost a lot of money, no matter what. So it sounds kind of sad, but in reality, this gave Aurora the opportunity to really plan what was next. And also for the small communities, that are coming up, where we did the 36 communities where we did the inventory. It gave them an opportunity to plan as well. And that's what good data will do for you. So from that, I'm going to give it back to Dana.
Nerd. All right, so here's that fun genera pie again. The statistic that I found most, I don't know, interesting and alarming from that when I was looking at it last night is that 50% of the trees in this inventory are in only 4 genera. That's not enough. Not enough diversity. This is why it's not enough diversity. Spending some time on the APHIS website, again, preparing to have this conversation. Dana mentioned that Asian longhorned beetle came up in their work with the city of Aurora, but this list of nasty bugs is what APHIS is looking for in Colorado and concerned about in Colorado. ALB, the European cherry fruit fly, the copra beetle, spotted lantern fly, emerald ash borer, obviously, the spongy moth, and the flighted spongy moth complex. I'm not a bug person, so I don't completely understand the difference in those two, but it looked to me like it was spongy moth and some of their close relatives. All of those insects like to eat all of these types of trees that are overrepresented in Colorado's urban forest. The ash trees, the maple trees, the cottonwoods and other poplars, all our oaks, our elms, the prunus, those cherry and other fruit trees, and a number of these also like willows. We don't have a ton of willows, but it is a portion of our canopy and something that was liked to be munched on by these insects. So these are data points that we need in our management toolbox. I think me personally, professionally, I'm most concerned about this guy. Highly generalized in what it likes to eat as opposed to the emerald ash borer, which eats ash and defoliates and consumes the good inside bits of the tree, killing them. But you only have to worry about Fraxinus. Ash trees. Spotted lanternfly, it just goes gangbusters, right? He's like, it's a tree, it kind of looks like a tree, I'm gonna eat it. So if and when this shows up in Colorado, we have a major problem that I would argue is really only solvable with a diverse species palette and proactive, data-based, well-reasoned management so that we have different species in our forest, different genera of trees in our forest, different age trees in our forest. So you don't have to do everything all at once. A big part of the Your Ashes on the Line project, again, that Dana mentioned and came up again in the city of Aurora, they have this big concern with EAB because not only are they going to lose or have to remove and deal with the wood from their public trees, there's all these private trees. What do we do with the wood? What do we do with wood in communities and in states that don't have much forestry industry or have lost their forestry industry, or it's not close to where the communities are? We very explicitly made that a part of the Your Ashes on the Line project so that we're thinking about urban and community forestry in a full circle, like a whole life cycle sort of way. It's really easy to get folks jazzed and excited about planting trees, right? Who likes to plant trees? I like to plant trees. We go celebrate Arbor Day. We plant trees with kids, with their parents, with their grandparents, with businesses. Like, it's easy to plant trees. How many people host volunteer events to cut trees down? Probably, I'm like, I want to come hang out for that. So we did one. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a volunteer event, but the last workshop that we did in this series, and the only one that we got to do in person because pandemic, was in Fort Collins in one of their big parks that happened to be right by the forestry offices. We invited a bunch of folks out to watch the city remove this tree that had to come down. It was a high-risk tree in a highly trafficked park, next to and within striking distance of the bathroom structure, right? So if you've gone through any kind of tree risk assessment, you're like, okay, likelihood of failure, we've got a target, this is a tree that we need to take care of. And we wanted to use this as a demonstration and a teachable opportunity to say, here's how we would take this tree down in order to use the wood to its highest and best use. We probably had, 30, 40 people out there to watch this tree come down and to watch it be milled in the parking lot. So we had a great gentleman by the name of Ryan Baldwin Hardwoods is the operator out of the Fort Collins area. Started out as an arborist, got a wood miser saw, started cutting stuff up, and now that's his business. We need more of those folks. We need to talk to those folks. We need to engage them, understand their business model, understand their needs if we're going to tackle the kind of management that we need with EAB and with spotted lanternfly and the kinds of removals that we're going to see over the next 10 years. So I'm really excited to see this wood utilization work move from this kind of awareness building and education phase, which is really where it's at in Colorado, into some hardcore action, right? And seeing more trees come down in a way that they can be used to make slabs. Seeing more partnerships develop with solid waste recyclers, right? Composting companies, huge player in this, right? When we take down our trees, we're gonna have some nice, art slabs, maybe some hardwood lumber kind of stuff, and then a bunch of trash. It's not even good for chips, for, biofuel or heating projects. We need that whole spectrum, right? And we were in, a bunch of folks went out to San Marcos, California for this Urban Wood Academy, and we went and visited, a solid waste place and talked about that being, a marshaling yard, that being a potential place where you could bring this type of material for it to be milled, for it to be marketed, and for some of it to go into their compost processes. We had some folks from Boise, Idaho. That's where our friend Lance lives and works these days. For part of this workshop series, we brought some folks from Boise to Colorado, and we visited our makers, our millers, our urban forests, and they brought one of their waste guys with them. And that was the first time I'd seen that connection made, but when it got made again in such a big way in California, I'm like, damn, I need to talk to the guys at A1, recycling in Denver that produces all the compost, that potentially would be really interested in engaging in this full cycle urban forestry. And that's I think where we want to leave this presentation, leave some of these ideas for today, is we've collected a lot of data. We've built some really cool tools. We've provided these management resources. We've built awareness. We've used the challenge and the opportunity of the emerald ash borer to think much more holistically and much more long-term about how we plant, care for, remove and replace, retain really resilient, thriving urban and community forests. We want to keep doing this work. We want to keep learning about how to do this work better. We want to listen, and we want to spend all the federal government's money to, do the stuff that cities like Aurora know that they need to do, that cities like Albuquerque know that they need to do. So let's keep learning. Let's do more stuff. Let's spend a bunch of money on urban forests over the next 10 years. And everybody that's already a certified arborist, get your credits. Yay!